Thanks for the reminder. So the crazy eight is very simple. Take a sheet of paper, you fold it into 8 panels. Take an A4 sheet, or you can also take something smaller, depending on whatever you like. And in each of these panels, you get to draw or sketch one idea, so that you have like 8 different ideas. Or you can have one idea that you're continuously expanding on all of these different 8 panels. So that's a crazy 8. And once you have the crazy 8, you'll go in and make a detailed solution sketch. So we'll look at how all this also unfolds now in a moment. I just want to give you a quick overview of what happens in the sketch phase. And once you're done with the sketching, you need to share it with the rest of the team and make sure that everyone gets a chance to give their votes. So that's where there is a voting process. So as you see in this image, so you have people voting on the different elements or aspects of the ideas of the solution sketches that are displayed. Everyone gets a chance to understand the ideas a little bit more deeply. And based on that, you agree on which idea is sort of, or which concept is sort of the winner, and which concept is going to be selected to be storyboarded. So the storyboard is nothing but, like a high level, breakdown of the different steps that are to be taken while making this concept. So for example, maybe this is the first step. In the first step, you just give a quick explanation. There is an image, there's a little bit of text, there's a 360 view, and this is the screen on the phone on which it appears, for example. So you just try to lay out all the details of what it's going to really look like in the storyboard. So there you go. That's the big high-level overview of Sketch and Decide. Let's now jump into more details. So for lightning demos, I'm thinking of following what we came up with the last time. So we said we're going to have this as a problem statement, the whole vaccination thing, with citizens not being able to, trying to get vaccinated, but it takes a long time, and being frustrated with the process. That's more or less the problem statement. And they go through these different phases of awareness, consideration, trust, and delivery. And we did a little bit of mapping in the previous session, and we arrived at, like 2 parts, which were very interesting. So there were a couple of other parts, but I felt this one was really interesting. So there was a how might we make sure the myths about the vaccine are deconstructed, and the stakeholders that we wanted to focus on, or the users we wanted to focus on, were the vaccine opponents, or the people who didn't believe in vaccine, non-believers, anti-vaxxers, call them whatever you want. So that's the focus now. So that's what we're going to focus on. So for lightning demos, you would then ask each person in the sprint team to go out and look for inspiration around this, around this particular problem that we are trying to solve. So the solutions could be in a completely different domain. Like, for example, maybe they're looking for solutions in the shipping industry, or they're looking for how does the paint making industry solve it? Or how do non-medical people even approach the idea of vaccines? So what we're looking for in lightning demos is each participant goes out and comes back with 3 inspirations, and also gives you 3 clear either visuals or a fair idea of what the big picture or the big idea is behind these 3 inspirational pieces. And another way of doing this is to also ask them to, make a small video. You can just quickly ask them to record something on Loom, and also give you like 3 post-its to say, okay, what's the big idea in each of the three inspirational parts that they found. So lightning demos take some time, but if you give it as sort of a homework for the participants at the end of the map making session, which is the end of the previous session, then it becomes much more easier. So this means that they can go do it at their own pace and come back in this way. If you give them a template or a format in which they can position the results, then it becomes much easier for you to go through them in the next session. Was this part about the lightning demos clear? Any questions there? Hey, Skyline Technologies, I think you just joined us now.
Rakesh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
What's your name again?
My name is Chandray.
Hi,
Chandray Saha. Yeah, Chandray is my name.
Welcome, Chandray.
Thanks. Yeah.
Great. So that was lightning demos. We started with some inspirations, and so the sprint team, let's imagine they collect a lot of inspiration and they come to the 4-step sketch after that. So why don't we try out this part? So this whole thing, again, there are different ways of doing this. As I said, what I like doing is I set up a call with the sprint team, and we are all present in the call, but we're not actively doing each of these exercises all the time. Instead, I just take like 20 minutes to explain all the exercises to the whole team. And while we're still online, everyone is still working at it at their own pace. And if they have any questions, they're always coming back and saying, hey, I'm in the ideas part of things. I have a question. Can you help me out with it, etc. And this gives participants the time to sit back and create these sketches at their own pace. So why don't we try out the Crazy 8 and the solution sketches? I think that'll give us a good idea of what it looks like. So for starters, let's take this how might we. Let me share my screen again instead of that. So this is the how might we question. How might we make sure that the myths about the vaccine are deconstructed, and we are targeting vaccine opponents? So why don't we take 8 minutes for you to all try out the Crazy 8s method. So the Crazy 8s is super easy, like I showed you just a moment ago. You just take a sheet of paper, fold it in 8, and just draw or sketch or write down, use a combination of text and sketching to create your first ideas there. So this is more like getting a first idea dump. And once you do that, you'll be able to fine tune it or refine either one of these ideas or a couple of elements that you find interesting into a solution sketch. We'll look at how the solution sketch also can be done, but let's try out this Crazy 8s, okay? Are you up for it? So let me focus on the how might we again. I'll set up the timer. Your time starts now. 8 minutes. And it's a go.
Rakesh, sorry, my computer crashed, so what do I have to do?
So we're doing the Crazy 8s. Just let me pause.
Can I draw in the board or do I upload it?
Just do it on paper. That's the easiest bit. Because drawing on the board is sometimes very difficult. Just take a sheet of paper, fold it in 8, and do it the old school way. Take a picture and upload it to the board.
Okay.
So halftime, 4 more minutes to go. Okay, last 2 minutes. If you already have it, then you can also just take a picture, drag and drop the picture onto the board.
Mm.
Rakesh, so
Yeah.
how do I bring it to the board? I take a picture and then
Yeah, just take a picture and you can just drag and drop it as an image.
But the picture needs to be on my laptop, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can just maybe.
Or is there uploading with QR code or something? No, right?
No.
Because it exists on some boards.
Ah, okay. I don't see it here. I haven't used it here at all.
Okay.
But that's a good function to have. You're right.
It's on concept board. There's
Ah, okay.
I don't know here.
No, not really. Old school.
Mm.
Okay, timer says it's up. How are you doing, people? I'm excited about the first sketches. Yes, first sketches. Almost there. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, good stuff. So, great job sharing that. So one pager that explains how vaccines work, media, volunteers and advocates. Yeah, if no more consequences, then you can get vaccinated. Good start. Yeah, so I hope this, this is just to give you an idea of how the process works and for you to get a feeling of these steps involved here. Normally, you don't have to share your crazy eights. Instead, you just keep your crazy eights to yourself and then pick and choose the most important elements of that and try to make a clear solution sketch. So, but the solution sketch takes longer to make, at least 30 to 45 minutes. Thanks, Roxanne. I'm gonna expand that too. Thank you. That's a second crazy eight coming in. Good stuff. Explain the concept, examples of eradication, debunk longstanding myths. Yeah, explain the process of different manufacturing processes. Yeah, this is good start. And if you also notice, it's sometimes easier, a lot of people just use text, which is completely all right. This is not a beauty contest at all. It's just about, getting this crazy-eyed format in whatever way you're comfortable with. Hey, there's more coming in. Look at that. Yeah, so there's like a transparency website, pros and cons. There's a risk profile app. Very nice. And then there's like a decision making, so Val automat type of decision support. Nice. So it's just asking you to helping you with your decision making process. Very cool.
Yeah, like the
And
thing you can use before the election, right? The Wahlumlauf.
yeah, true. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Cool stuff there. Let's see. I think Goli had a question there. I see your hand up.
Hi, yes. Why don't we put our ideas in the Miro board instead of writing it down in papers and then upload it?
You can. I mean, I'm not against it. From my experience, I've just felt that it takes much more longer when you have an empty canvas and people are like, oh, should I take this? Should I take that? What I do sometimes is ask people to create a mood board.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then you can just go to any image website, pick the right images and bring a cluster of images, and that becomes your sort of mood board, which is going more in the direction of, you know, the kind of problem you're trying to solve. So
Awesome.
that's an option.
Perfect. And one quick question. Is it possible that we like share some small space in the Miro board with some specific people so that they do not see their space at like at any time, so everybody has their private space for sharing ideas before sharing it with public?
Yeah, sure. Of course, you can hide frames. So you just select this frame, for example, and then you see that icon, right? Right there, hide frame, and it hides it.
Okay, and is it after you input your maybe drawings or writing in the Miro board, right?
Whenever you want. That's, I mean, depends for whatever reason you can hide a frame. You can either hide it before or after. That doesn't make a difference. So you can even hide an empty frame with nothing.
Mm-hmm. So what I mean is actually maybe for today's session, we have 6 people.
Yeah.
You assign a particular space for each of us, maybe for me one, for Julia one. And then at the time that we are providing our ideas, in order not to bias others, we just work on that space. Is it the only option we have with frames, right?
Yeah, so you can do that. So for example, then it would be similar to the lightning demos. You know, each one of you would grab one of these frames, but I don't think you can hide your frame while you're working in it.
Right.
So I think that may not be possible, but you're right about, you know, the bias aspect of it. I'm completely with you there. That's why you just ask, mostly you ask people to upload the solution sketches. And then, you know, once the solution sketches are uploaded, it's really more about trying to understand, you know, which elements or components or parts of these ideas are interesting. So you're not voting then for which concept or idea is interesting, but you're going for the parts first.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.
Anytime. So let's go a little bit more into detail, but there's a couple more crazy aids coming in: TV campaigns, mural studies. I would say we can recruit the Scientologists for this. Case studies of past vaccination campaigns. Yeah, perfect. There's a nice one from Paula. Very good. Yeah, it's getting some resolution there. Interviews with experts at bus stops. Then you have an app or supermarket at a bank. Yeah. So again, when you're doing crazy aids, it's totally okay if not all of it, you know, has the sort of thread running through it, and if it's not completely self-explanatory. But this is important for the solution sketch. Okay, so keep in mind when you're moving from the crazy aids to the solution sketch, there are a couple of things that you need to inform your sprint team about. First of all, there needs to be a catchy title, because you need to sort of, you know, make sure that there's a really a nice concept you can condense into this title, and make sure that people are attracted to it and you attract some attention. And you have mainly 3 steps. So there's always a drawing and some text that goes with these 3 steps, and they are sort of the 3 most important or relevant aspects of your idea or solution that you're looking at. So you can see the cyber truck example here. So it's got 3 sketches. The first sketch is an overview, and the text says, yeah, it looks badass. It's straight out of Terminator or Mad Max. It is the future. The second one talks about the pricing. The third one talks about a key feature. So you're like really nailing 3 important aspects of your solution. And if you look at it again, it's very self-explanatory, right? You don't need someone to come and explain it to you. So when I look at a solution sketch, I should be able to make sense of it completely on my own. So this is a very important aspect because we won't be doing what is called a sort of selling or pitching or explanatory round of the sketches. Instead, we do what's called an art museum or a silent critique. I'll show you how that works in a moment. So just to make sure that you understand the process, there are mainly 4 steps. You start with taking some notes. You get inspired by everything that you've created. You can look at the how might we's, you can look at the lightning demos, you can look at the key questions, the sprint questions that you're answering. Then you get some first ideas, scribbles and doodles. Then you make your crazy 8. And from the crazy 8, you make your solution sketch and you upload actually the picture of the solution sketch. Okay. And remember, it needs to be self-explanatory, and there are 3 important aspects to it that you're going to highlight there. So how do you decide once you've sketched? So let's move slowly to the decision-making part now. So here there are 2 kinds of decisions that can be taken. One is we can use what is called the heat map vote, just for all the participants to indicate which elements they really like of the idea. Then there is the decider super vote. So you usually have a decider in a sprint team. It can be the person with the most amount of knowledge on this topic, or the person who knows, where the future of this particular solution is going, and could have the budget and could be responsible for turning it into a product or service or whatever is needed, could really have the lead on that. So the decider gets a super vote. And the decider can vote on the entire concept. So let's say we get one concept that's like the Cybertruck. Maybe there's another concept called the super truck. So the decider gets to say, okay, I like the Cybertruck more, and I'm going to pick that as the one to be storyboarded. So this really helps the decision-making process move ahead. This also doesn't mean that the decider's vote is more hierarchically better or final in that sense. It's more to give direction, because the decider usually holds a lot more information about the future and scope of what this sprint solution is going to turn into. And at the same time, we have a chance or an opportunity for all the sprint team participants to express their thoughts in the form of, their votes, where they say, hey, I like this aspect of it, or I did not like this aspect of it. So having said that, let's look at how the art museum and silent critique part works. So like I said, and as the instructions also tell you, so you'll take about 20 minutes to look at all the concepts, all the solution sketches that are in these separate frames. And you can add these little green dots on the parts of the ideas that you like. So after this, you will then do a small discussion round. Again, this is open to the way in which you design your sprints. Some people do a very different form of this, where the person who has created the idea will not be explaining it. Instead, the other people will try to interpret this idea and make sense of it. And finally, when everyone's done their best, the person who has made the solution sketch will sort of fill in the gaps and say, okay, people, you got this right. This is the direction I was looking for. And these are the things that you missed. So that's one way of getting everyone really clear on what all those sketches meant. So having done that, let's assume that you voted, the team has voted. That's why you see the straw poll here, and you also see the super votes. Let's also imagine that the decider has chosen a particular concept and also likes some of the idea elements. Another alternative is that the decider can also put together multiple elements and create a new concept. So the decider can say, okay, I like element 2 from here. I like these particular smaller elements, and I'm going to take this other concept, marry it together. And this is what I feel it can be storyboarded. So that's how you move from the sketch and having decided, you start moving to the storyboard. Coming to the storyboard, what is it actually? So the storyboard is nothing but imagine a comic book panel. So it's a text and graphic representation of all the things that you need in order to really go into much detail. So here again, if you remember the last time, the way we collaboratively created the map, each participant individually created their own journey, and then we fused it together. This is what will happen here also. So each sprint team participant kind of goes and tries to answer the question, what should we test with our customer to answer our questions? So they specify the tester, in our case, say vaccine opponents. So what is the first thing we'll show them? Then we'll show them this, and then we'll show them the third piece, and finally we'll show them this piece. So the storyboard really takes the solution sketch, puts in a whole lot more detail, and gives you like a step-by-step interpretation of what the the final solution should look like. So here's an example, and this is where Miro, I feel, comes in very, very handy. So you can use something called the wireframe library here on the left navigation bar. It has all the elements that you need. You have icons, you have components, you can use different devices, you can use browser elements that you can just drag and drop. You can basically create a very quick wireframe already at this stage and get as much clarity as possible in a very rough way. And maybe there is a designer or artist person in the sprint team who can then do a second round or a second iteration on this and make the storyboard a little bit more clearer. So that's basically what comes out of the sketch and decide phase. How about questions for starters? How was that? Did that make sense?
So how much time would you usually take for those two things? Like, is it 2 days, the sketching and the deciding?
In the classic version, it's 2 days of 2 whole days of the classic sprint. But I would do something like, say, 2 to 3 hours for each session, roughly. Mm-hmm. And even these 2 to 3 hours, you can break it up. So for example, the lightning demos can be homework, and you can just come and review the results very quickly. And then you can explain the 4-step sketch, and then the team can still be in the call, but you don't have to be alive and working through it together all the time. So you can say, look, we're going to take the next 2 hours to do the sketching part. Please make sure that you send in your solution sketches at the end of it to me, either plug it into the board, upload them, or send it by email to the facilitator. And that's usually very easy. And people ask questions in between if they have any questions.
So the lightning demos, are they for inspiration or what?
Yes, they're for inspiration. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So basically, then you do sketching, then you decide. Yeah. Then after that, like let's say we pick one now, mm-hmm. We would pick one of the sketches to further develop it together or individually.
It's all together. Mm-hmm. So you would then create the storyboard, and once the storyboard has been created, in the next session we'll see how prototyping works. So prototyping, you would then, each one in the team would take up a particular task. So one person would probably be in charge of creating the text, another person goes and collects media and images, maybe another person puts it all together, So you just take on different roles in the team and do the prototyping together after this. Did that make sense?
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
And the super vote, so is it that the facilitator always has more power than the others?
Oh, no, this is not for the facilitator. So forgot to mention this part. So you have the different roles in the team, right? So there is the sprint facilitator, which could be you, or it could also be someone else from the sprint team. And you have someone called the decider. So you need to appoint the role of a decider to make sure that tough decisions are taken and it doesn't go into a sort of discussion battle. Usually what happens when tough decisions need to be made, people sit and talk about it for a very long time, and at the end of it, they're still unhappy because there is no such thing as the right decision. You can only take a certain decision, try it out, and see what happens to it. So to make this process really smooth, you have participants giving their input and saying, as in participants in the sense, sprint team members, they say that, hey, I like this concept, or I like these elements of this concept. At the same time, you also have the decider. So the decider could be the CEO, the decider could be the team leader. Sometimes it could even be the frontline sales manager who knows a lot about, how this product or service is going to develop. So the decider may come in and say, hey, you know what, I like this concept because it fits in well with what we want to do and the kind of questions we're trying to answer. So I pick this particular concept. So you're sort of accelerating the decision-making process by giving votes to both sprint team members as well as to the decider.
Thank you.
Anytime. So it might be tricky when you try to do the whole decision-making process. The first time I tried to do it, failed really badly. So don't worry about that. Just go in and try it out because there are multiple elements there. So you do what is called the heat map vote first, which is all about just understanding, which elements of ideas are really interesting and can be taken into consideration. Then if you want, you do a straw poll. This is also to get the group's opinion. So each team member or sprint team member uses one or two votes to say, hey, this is the direction, or this is the kind of concept I'm more leaning towards. And if this still doesn't give you some clear decisions, then you go for a super vote. Ultimately, when the decider makes this decision, that's what you'll prototype. And the storyboard takes a lot of time. So I would again follow a similar process like we did for the sketching. Keep, say, about 2 hours for this. Make sure that everyone has individually created their version of what their individual storyboard looks like. Bring it here together. And there's a create here. And then you can do like at least 2 iterations on the larger storyboard so that it becomes really clear what it is that you want to prototype. Otherwise, what happens if you're not clear with the storyboard is that in the prototyping phase, you keep coming back to the storyboard and you're asking questions like, okay, so what really happens here? What are we doing? And why is it like this? So it just increases the frustration at some point if you have to keep going back and forth from the storyboard to the prototyping process. So instead, spend the time, use that time to really focus and make a storyboard. That's going to be very helpful and really makes prototyping and testing very smooth after that. Yes, I think you're right, Koli. It's tricky, of course, because the power dynamics impacts the decisions being made. And this is where you can be, as the facilitator, you can really ensure that the process is a lot more smoother. Even if you have someone trying to power their way through, you can, at that point, take a time out, have a discussion. Because if you look at the sprint book, the whole sketching and decision-making process can be very clinical. It just talks about, okay, you do this next, and then you go through this. But there might be moments where people will not agree, or people will come and say, hey, look, I like all of this, but I think we maybe need a second round of solution sketches to really maybe arrive at something that makes sense for us to storyboard. That's possible. Or you might even see people not arriving at a decision-making point, which is something then you have to actively facilitate or ask people to go into a final decision-making vote. So yeah, it is definitely tricky. Any other questions on sketching and deciding? So maybe, for example, going back to the problem you were bringing to the table, Goli, does it now fit into what you were trying to do? Can you now maybe visualize where we're going with the sketching and the decision making there?
So is it a question for me?
Yeah. Just trying to understand if it suits or if it fits in with the problem that you're trying to solve. And
actually, if you remember, I talked that the project that I'm currently involved in is decision making around the solution for disability students, but this solution is not only being guided by the student themselves, it's from like the managers of the systems and the policymakers and the organizations and academia. So that's why we are having these discussions around how are we going to balance this power dynamic in a way that the solutions are going to be helpful. So what actually we are trying to make sure is that everybody is going to be heard. And probably the solution space is going to be to take into account the perspective from all the stakeholders' perspective, and maybe starting with the storyboard for each individual person in the system, and trying to figure out all those gaps from that actor's perspective. And when we find some solution for that particular person, then we see in the system map how it's gonna fit, that it's gonna impact the other person as well, maybe.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm sure we are still planning that. I'm sure at the time that we are making decisions around which tool to include in our toolbox, there should be some challenge, and we need to have some knowledge products in the format of anything that is gonna be aligned to every single individual in the system. So yeah.
Understand. Yeah, I think everyone wants to see their input being respected and their experience also being taken into account. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So that actually sort of brings us to the sketching and the decision-making part of things. So this can be a very collaborative process. So you can have people doing this, although they're individually sketching solutions and sharing it. After that, the process of going through critiquing it or understanding which elements actually are really interesting and useful is very collaborative. And even the decision making and storyboarding after that can be super collaborative. So it also depends on the way you set it up and run the whole thing.
So Rakesh, this is Chandray.
Hi, Chandray.
Tech. Yeah. So I have got a question because you mentioned about the Crazy 8 concept, during the sketch stage.
Yeah.
So basically, my question to you will be how this Crazy 8 concept will be, correlated with, like, say, storyboarding or decision making, afterwards.
Okay, so the Crazy Eight is just like sort of an initial step before you go into a formal storyboard. So imagine it as like the first, very rough sketch of things before you make a very detailed storyboard. So you can actually even go and say, hey, I just want to start with the storyboard itself because I really know, what comes out of it. But the reason why it has a lot more chances to fail if you jump straight to a storyboard is because you'll end up spending so much more time there trying to understand, okay, where do I start? And, can I make some quick scribbles and maybe do multiple iterations until I create the final storyboard? So instead, the Crazy Eight just gives you an opportunity to go step by step, make a first, very rough scribble of your ideas. Then it helps you graduate from there to the solution sketch, which is a little bit of a next level. So in the solution sketch, you have more detail, you're more, clearer about, you mentioned those three very important aspects. And from there, then the team needs to select which elements are actually interesting. Once the selection is made, then you can take the solution sketch and further detail it or flesh it out. So for example, those three aspects that we thought of, that we see here, for example, with the Cybertruck. Let me share my screen again. So the three aspects of the solution sketch can become 30 or more in the storyboard. So each panel, each of these things could be a full panel in the storyboard. So you can have a lot more detail. You can really create a whole lot more things here where you say, okay, so we are creating, for example, maybe a rough app in which you get to see how this Cybertruck works. It's like an introduction. So the first step there is you'll get to see a 360 view, and you'll also see an image and a little bit text of why this is a great product, something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks for explaining.
Great. So let me quickly check if we have Sandy joining us. Oh yeah, there you are, Sandy, on time. Welcome. Ah, hello.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing? So people, big hello to Sandy Lamb from Software AG. She's a product designer and passionate sprinter. So we met at the GVDS, which is the Global Virtual Design Sprint community, and we've been in touch ever since. So she's amazing at doing all things sprint style. I've learned so much every time we were together in a sprint, or when we did stuff, or as part of the GVDS. There was so much to learn. So I thought it would be interesting to get her in to share some thoughts on sketching and deciding.
Yeah, hello everyone. And such a pleasure to be here.
Hello.
Hi.
So we just did a run through, Sandy, and we just looked at how you're sketching and what the decision-making process looks like. Do you have something to share from your experience of sketching and deciding? Maybe you can start there.
Yeah, could. Are you guys? I don't know exactly what you guys have covered, so a little bit hard for me to just kind of jump in here. But in general, I would say like the sketching part, like my experience has been very, very tailored to remote design sprints, I have to say. Have done in-person design sprint, but it's not my strong point there. So yeah, most of the time I use the Miro instead of Miro, so the pink one. But I mean, it doesn't matter actually in the end, they're all the same. Yeah, so I think like for the sketching, what is often very, or not the sketching, but more of deciding which part we want to really move forward to. I found that very often is that many people become it's like a very tough choice, and then everyone's like, oh, I want everything there. Like, can we include all stuff that we have done and put it in
Make one big monster out of it.
Yeah, and that is like almost happens every single time. And I had like, I guess one of the most memorable experience that I had was that I got this guy. This experience was actually in a physical design sprint. Actually, that's one of the reasons I don't like it. So I gave like he was the designer, and then I gave him one dot to make the final decision. And then he actually tear the dot into half, and he will put half on one sketch and then the other half on the other. So yeah, so that but it doesn't happen in a remote world, right? I mean, they could still duplicate it, but yeah, it's a little bit tougher. But this guy, we will just like tear it down into half and put it in. So I found like managing the expectation and really narrow it down to like what are we really trying to do. Seems to be the most important thing for the deciding exercise, especially. Yeah.
So just to catch you up on what we did, so we just went through like, the sketching part, the 4-step sketch,
Okay.
what happens there, and then what happens in the decision-making process of how the team does a heat map first, and then you have the straw poll and the super vote, and then you transition to say the storyboard, which is a whole lot more detail, and we were looking at what a first pass of a storyboard could look like.
Mm-hmm. In between, typically what I do is that I would also insert an extra step, which is maybe I can also share my screen.
Sure.
Let me find it first. Yep. So, okay, let me know when you see.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one example that this is actually taken from the Global Virtual Design Sprint. And this is one example how we have done it. So on the left is lightning demo. From here, that's the solution sketch. And what we typically do is in between the decision or the storyboard, after the decision, when we make the storyboard, we actually also include an exercise called the storyboarding story flow, which involve like what I would do is I would ask the participants to write down what those steps would be, like what is the first screen and what's the last screen, and then they put the steps in between. And then we would actually vote on which flow we want to use. I found the exercise is quite useful because it eliminates a lot of discussions in terms of like what is actually the first step and what is the last step. So this is a way of making that happen before we actually lay out all the details. This is also a very typical example of how the storyboard kind of turned into more like a note-taking thing. Which is actually okay in many cases. I know like in the book, we say that the storyboard has to be as detailed as possible. But what we have found is in the virtual world, like when we do it, as long as like the notes are very detailed in a way, it also works out. Like you don't actually have to every time already put out all the like almost doing a wireframe. That's how the book is mentioned, right? Like you almost have to write out where is the logo supposed to be, what kind of image it goes to that. But yeah, from our experience, like it seems to be like even if we just have a lot of detailed notes, it often works as well. Here's another example, which we actually just draw stuff and then upload it. So when we go to the storyboarding, we would divide a screen into different people, like maybe one person take the first 2 screen or something, and then after that we put them together, and then we walk it through again, just to make sure that we are all aligned. So yeah, that is because what we found is like when we actually have like a group session virtually, it seems to be very hard to make that kind of, you know, rapid fire brainstorming or like discussion happen. That's why we tend to actually work alone first and then put them all back together. Yeah.
So you would sort of say, let's take the storyboarding session for like 2 to 3 hours, announce what needs to be done, do the story flow in the beginning, and come back, say, after 2 hours to see what people have, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like here we did the user flow, right? So then we put the user flow steps on each screen, and then we assign each person 1 or 2 screens to work on. Of course, we discuss a little bit how we connect them. And then after then we just kind of go offline. Some people actually prefer to stay online. Like I always give that option, like it's like almost like an introvert and extrovert thing, honestly. It's like some people like to work alone and some really need the group to be there to work, even like you're doing your own thing. So then I always give them both options. You can stay online together or you can just take it off, do it on your own. And then, but the point is we come back in a certain hours, like in 2 hours, and then we compare them together and kind of stitch them together back. So yeah.
Very cool.
And here, yeah, just another example of how we do the storyboarding here. What we have done differently is we start putting in different emojis to represent different ideas or how we actually think about them as well. It's a way to make it more fun. And also instead of just like, I like it or I don't like it, you can actually also say much more visually.
Yeah. We also did that once where we said like, used emojis of burgers, tacos, and maybe a third food item of some sort to escalate the levels of, why we didn't like something. If it was a burger, it was like a normal level of, okay, I can tolerate this. If it's a taco, I really don't like this. So we need to have a conversation on, what elements don't really work or why someone feels very strongly about it. And another emoji was to indicate the highest level of, say, okay, I really hate it, but I can't explain why.
Yeah. I think like adding some kind of like fun elements to the design sprint is always a plus. Tend to be quite intensive, especially when you get to like day 3 and 2 days of full workshop, and then so we tend to insert a lot of different fun elements in there.
And time-wise, since you're talking about that too, Sandy, how long does the sketch and decide part take you in a remote sprint?
So the sketching section, it's again, like I always give them 2 options. One is they can just take it and come back the next day with their sketches. The other option I often give is that I will say like schedule a section or sometimes actually 2 or 3 different sections. I call it like kind of like an open house thing. So people could still come and then draw together if they wish. Okay. Sometimes they do, sometimes it's just like no person actually shows up, and which is absolutely okay as well. But typically what happens is like day 2, I end it like with the instructions of the solution sketch, and then they come back with the solution sketch next day. In terms of like actually walking through the solution sketches and making the decision and all that, typically that particular section would be like around 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Because like we have tried to condense it a little bit to give less time, but then the result was not that good because people kind of just towards the end. I mean, it also depends on the number of participants in the group, but typically if I have like 8 to 10 people, then it tends to be a lot of stuff to read and a lot of stuff to explain, and it actually all takes time. If you give them less time, they would just like, okay, they just not reading the text, they just see the images, okay, I like it, I don't like it, which is not as good as well, because this is like actually one of the most crucial part of the design sprint, that decision making. So I typically would spend a lot of time making using that, and that's why the decision here, it goes to the different steps of voting instead of just one kind of voting. We do like I'm sure you already covered it, like we do the heat map voting, straw poll voting, and then decision voting. So yeah.
Those are the 3 types.
Yeah.
Great. Any questions at this point from the audience?
I have a question, Sandy. I'm currently participating in the GVD as well. And we actually, in my group, there's a lot of discussion at the moment that sketching, and especially virtual sketching, always leads to kind of digital solutions. So they say, like, some of them, they're just say, okay, like whenever we do design sprint, the result is an app or a website. And they think that the process is kind of biased towards a digital solution. Do you agree? Or do you have other ways maybe to not bias it in that direction? Because I agree, it's easier to sketch an app. It's more difficult to sketch a process.
But I don't think it's the sketch part, actually. Well, first of all, design sprint originally was made for digital products. So that is no surprise that people tend towards the digital solution, because the process was actually originally made for that. But having said that, I have actually also done solutions that actually end up to be not like a digital solution. But it's not just because of the sketch that made it into a digital solution. It's more when we actually when we decide on things. I think like that is even the steps before that actually kind of determine that already. What I always emphasize is that's like try to think outside the box. We can think of digital solutions, but it's not limited to that. And I typically inside my instruction, I would give them different examples of how we had done it not digitally. So for example, like marketing pages, that is also a way. Like the end product, especially like in virtual world, because we can't actually group together to actually build a prototype that is physical, right? But in the end, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't have a physical prototype, you can still make, for example, like a marketing page that sells a physical product. So that is a way of testing it. Yeah. So I think like the setting the expectation and just kind of letting them know, like included in the instruction, that like it's not limited to digital, that could help. But I don't think it's the sketch that actually makes it people think more digitally. I think it's just the nature, like when we think of ideas now, it's very typical that we think of like digital solutions.
I think, the problem statement or the problem you're working on plays a role there, and the kind of prototyping questions you ask also. So I can also say similarly, I've worked on, we created a contract as a prototype once, or we created, I think, something that was non-digital, but at the same time, still something that we could create together. So
yeah. I think was it last year, 2 groups of the GVDS actually created a physical prototype. One group got really lucky because they actually had 2 teammates that like they hadn't met before, but they actually live very close by. So one person just drove to the other side and created a prototype. I just call it as cheating. Because but they were able to do it. The other group that I knew, they end up to be it is actually a physical product. They create this kind of like cards that people could, I think it was for, I don't remember exactly what exactly the challenge was, but I think it was like cards for education stuff.
Okay.
But but then they actually did it digitally, but then
and then printed it maybe.
Yeah, but then the end product is actually for print, right? So it's still kind of like digital, but it's not really. So yeah.
Yeah, got that. Any other questions? I think probably Chandri, you were looking for a question.
So it was really nice, Sandy, because you actually you put in insight, So basically, what you're talking about, it's basically we're going from the sketch, storyboarding towards the prototype, isn't it? Stage as a stage. So yeah, it's definitely so. And the voting, then it actually it gives us another additional insight for deciding. So that's nice, actually. Yeah. Definitely. Mm.
Yeah, I was actually very curious about like what is the mechanisms behind all this voting, because like there are so many different votings, right? Like there is the anonymous type of voting, and there's the sticky dots kind of voting that where you just put emojis or like red dots and people just move them around. And there's another one is the mouse hovering voting. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but like for example, like on Miro or I guess all the digital whiteboarding too, when you move your mouse, you can see everyone's cursors. So what we so what we do is like for example, if we want to vote between 3 options, and then we just ask the participant to move your mouse cursor to the one and keep wiggling, and then we just kind of see where most mouse cursors are, and then we decide which one is. Yeah, and then there's like another one is like the decider voting, so it's not really a group voting, but then the groups would be helping the designer to make a final voting in a way. So that those are like all the different kinds of voting. And I was like scratching my head, like, why do we need all these options? Like, what is actually the rationale behind it? So then I actually end up reaching out to Jake Knapp, and then he kind of explained it to me in what kind of situation we actually wanted to use which, and why, especially why in this designing process involves so many different steps of voting. It was because that is actually the outcome. I mean, not the final outcome. The final outcome is the data, but it's actually the one of the most important outcome that leads to those data, right? And that's why he said that it's actually very important to dedicate a good amount of time on the decision, and one set of voting is not even enough in this case.
Well, what are the recommended voting steps then? Like this guy said.
What do you mean? Say again.
So what voting steps do you take? Like when do you do anonymous? What do you do after the other? Is it a rule, or do you have to like make your own decision? So you as a facilitator.
I think like in the book actually lays out what kind of voting at what stage. But I mean, this is kind of off the scope of just like storyboarding, but still close enough to the designing. So like for anonymous voting is actually really good, because there are actually studies saying that peer pressure is like the ability to avoid peer pressure is actually a myth. Like they tested with brain scan and stuff. Not going to do bore you with all the detail, but like peer pressure is actually like avoiding the peer pressure is actually a myth. So it is, if you want to use anonymous voting, is probably the best way to do it when you actually want to see the individual opinion very clearly. The mouse hover kind of voting, I do it quite often when I just need to make a quick decision, like super quick. The downside for that is that it's very, because everyone sees like where the mouse is like flying to, and then they kind of would just join a group in a way. So you kind of need to know that that could be a way of changing the decision in the end. But I use that when I feel like, okay, we spend a lot of time discussing and all that, and then end up with 2 things that we just kind of have to pick. It actually doesn't quite matter in the end which one. Then that's when I would use that mouse hover voting. And another reason for that is like, for example, if I have like a sketch that is with all the different elements everywhere, and it's not just one sticky versus the other, then I would like ask them, like, can you point to where you actually like the most, or like, like I use that kind of way to say which elements on this picture do you like the most, and then they would just kind of like use the mouse to point it towards that. what else was there? Yeah, straw vote is a way to purposely give the space for individual thinking, but say out loud to convince or to convey the final decider. But then, like, you know, because if the straw vote goes like this, right? Like you write your name on the stickies, or you pick a sticky, and then it count down to 3, and everyone vote at the same time. And that is the way that we let people first give their individual opinion, but then at the same time we are going to reveal who actually decided on what, because then this person have the ability to explain why he also chose that decision and all the reasonings behind it. Is there any other voting that I forgot?
No, the dot voting. I've seen like you pick the dots and more like that's not really at the same time, because usually I see the others are moving the dots or the flames there.
Yeah.
And then I think that's also biased.
Yeah.
And okay, a lot of people have put the flame there. Should I put my flame there as well? And if there's something similar, I would rather put it on the card where most of the flames are somehow.
So I rarely use that kind of dot voting as to make decision. I actually use that kind of voting as a heat map. So then people actually wouldn't even mind if they are different, because it's just a heat map. And most of the time I was like give as many votes as they like to use that just to create a heat.
So I think here maybe it makes sense to distinguish between a heat map vote and a normal vote, in the sense that the heat map vote sort of points in the general direction of people's preferences. What do they usually like? But then you can have a very specific vote in which people have to decide between, say, 3 or 4 choices. And when they vote, they're picking a choice and saying, okay, I like choice A against B, C, and D, or something like that. So that's more or less the difference.
Thank you.
Nice. Any other questions? And do you like using Miro, all the wireframing elements also, Sandy, or do you just use, do you make I'm talking about the storyboarding part of things. So do you do it completely on Miro or Mural, or do you just do it again, or do people upload it? Do they take pictures?
Depends on the person. Like I don't typically limit one or the other. So like one of the, let me share the screen again. So yeah, so this one, like for example, like you can see some people actually upload the images because they prefer to actually draw. I personally, just me, I like to just use boxes to create stuff. So I use like the tools on Miro and just create squares and things like that, and also use the image tool. One new feature that I found very helpful now on Miro is that you can actually connect it with the Adobe Creative Cloud. So you can actually have like a UI kit in your Creative Cloud, and then you can just pull in images like buttons and stuff that you already create. And almost by the end of like this whole exercise, you almost already get the prototype, very realistically, instead of like just wireframing at the same time.
Yeah, those elements are very helpful. So, you can just get so much detail into a storyboard panel.
Yeah, I have also like actually prototype within Miro as well, because like all these elements, you can also insert links in between, and then you can like, if they can make it as a link to the next element. So like when you click on this, then it jump to the next screen or something. So I've created a prototype like that as well.
You can also create areas, right? So you can even say this is an area and then move to the next one. That also
but actually like I don't know which one this is, but just to show you like all this like all these stickies actually have a link, so you can always copy a link, and then you can make one element jump to another.
Yeah. So each element has its own link. Right?
Yeah, like every single element actually. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Last 3 minutes. I'm mindful of our time here. If you have any last questions, now's your chance. Okay, then on that note, I guess we can close. Thanks a lot, Sandy. It's been really cool. We have a new message. Maybe it's a question. Oh, that's just really saying thanks. Okay, no worries.
Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So feel free to connect with Sandy. She's on LinkedIn, and if you feel like reaching out and asking her more specific stuff, you can always do that. This was our session about sketching and deciding. So now we've seen problem framing, we've seen how we can understand the problem. We've also now tried to sketch and decide. The next part is about prototyping and testing. So we'll be looking at that next week. So until then, thank you everyone for joining. It's been very nice. Thanks for being here, and see you soon.
Yeah.